Welcome back to the Candidates Forum put on by the Dillon Tribune and KDBM, KBEV. Next up on our agenda are the two candidates for the House seat here in Montana from our district, Jeff Welborn and Brooke Erb. And as was the case in the last one, each of you have 3 minutes to make an opening statement, and then we'll start with the questions. We'll start with the incumbent, Jeff. And if you could get that microphone a little closer, it'd be good.
Is that picking you?
Ready? Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Jeff Welborn. I'm your current House member for representing Montana's 72nd District, running for my 4th term. I'm a good listener with common sense and a strong voice. Please allow that experience and respected leadership to continue to make a difference. My campaign is simply about my track record, one focused on jobs, the economy, building infrastructure, and educating our kids. I'm proud of my voting record for small businesses, for natural resources, for private property rights, and the creation of good-paying jobs. I'm also a strong advocate for common-sense education policy in our rural hospitals.
I would just like to take a second to thank everybody for coming tonight and everybody that's out there in Radio Land for joining us, and I'm looking forward to a good forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Rookie?
I'm Brooke Erb, and I'm a candidate for House District 72. I have been reading about women entering politics and have found that most women, when asked why they decided to run for office, will tell you that they were encouraged. I was encouraged by local people and people from around the state who were discouraged with the dysfunction and dissension in Helena in the last session. I went to the legislative website and I found that in the House of Representatives there are 67 men and only 30 women serving. And in the Senate there are 40 men and only 10 women. Women are consensus builders, and we are more than half of the voting population. With the centennial of women's suffrage approaching, I have found my directive. Having worked in agriculture, education, and healthcare, 3 of the largest economic drivers of our local economy, I thought myself uniquely qualified to serve. So I began to think about what my campaign would look like. I went back to a time when the political landscape looked so much different. I decided that I would not send fundraising letters and that I would buy 10 banners and put them in central locations. My good friend for 40 years, Mary Ann, did my radio ad, and my co-worker Patty became my treasurer. My co-worker Kent designed my campaign materials, and a Western student, Kesley Lovick, a business admin and global politics major, wishing to do her internship working on a campaign, joined me. Seamus Manley, the student body president, wrote my letter to the editor, and Professor Shanu Daly helped coach me. I chose to seek local support as I would be representing local people. I identified 5 areas that were of importance to me and this district: agriculture, business, education, public lands, and resource development. I found a symbiotic relationship in these 5 areas. The legislative seats are open to anyone who wishes to run. They are not entitlements. We have a part-time citizen legislature envisioned by everyday Montanans, not career politicians. There is no system of seniority at the state level and no professional political class. So what is the difference between myself and Jeff Welborn? I'm going to use our campaign materials. On mine, you see here, me with my granddaughter. I'm going to have grandchildren in the school system. Here are the hay bales. These are on my property. So I'm in agriculture. Here is a riparian area. I care about the environment. Here's my work experience, my volunteer experience, and here are the 5 areas that I have identified. Here's Jeff Welborn's. This picture here is 4 years old. I know these 2 students. The one in the center is currently supporting my election. He's a good listener, a proven leader, a small business owner, I don't know what kind, a lifelong Montana resident, okay, an avid outdoorsman. What do? Hunt, fish, 4-wheel, House chair, ranking House member, majority whip, potentate. Your record, co-sponsor, 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 co-sponsor. For those of you that don't know, co-sponsor means you signed your name to the legislation. It does not mean you drafted it. Positive track record in protecting what is important to veterans. How? Children and working families in southwestern Montana. I know nothing about this person after reading this.
Okay, thank you. We have a bunch of questions here that have been submitted to both of you, so as I outlined in the beginning, each of you have up to 3 minutes to address each question. And we'll start with Brookie. What is your understanding of the duties of a state representative?
The duties of the state representative are to pass a balanced budget, work with your constituents, and make laws.
So we gave you some of the minutes you ran over. That's
Yeah.
good.
Balanced.
Yeah. You've been there, so tell us what the duties are.
First of all, by our Constitution says we do have to pass a balanced budget. We have to fund public education, and it's our job to pass laws for the agencies to carry out as the basic functions.
That's it? Okay, next question for Jeff, and this is from the same person that was asking about law enforcement. If our area or our legislative district grows or undergoes growth as some of the other communities in the state, what should we be doing to get prepared for it? Or what should you be doing to get prepared for it in the legislature?
Well, I think, I think it was alluded to earlier that as areas grow, so do tax bases. But you've got to have vital services taken care of. You've got to have public safety, your public infrastructure, things of that nature. You have to grow responsibly as your population grows. And as far as what the legislature can do for that is infrastructure projects and things like that. I mean, a lot of that is put back on local governments, but I think, it is our job to help these areas grow responsibly and not the long line of government in their business, but let local control take over and do its course.
Brookie, what do you think people should be doing, or the legislators should be doing with respect to growth in our community or in our legislative district?
Well, our community has already started to grow, and I think my family has set an example with the lovely new south entrance to Dillon. It took years of planning, and it's an example of a development that's done right. Regulation and compliance are the biggest issues facing business and agriculture. We're being forced to hire additional employees to comply with the ever-expanding bureaucracy. We need to rein in the expanding overreach of state regulations. Thoughtless regulations and the laundry list of new codes can significantly reduce the value of business. We need to concentrate on solutions to make Montana more business-friendly. We should promote activities that encourage a vibrant and growing economy and keep young people in our state. We need a competitive tax climate. Recently, Kiplinger rated the least friendly states for all over taxes. Montana ranked in the top 13 least friendly. Our current tax system is one of the most complicated and expensive to file and administer. The current property tax system is complicated and has problems that need to be addressed. We have not seen solutions to these problems. I would work to simplify the tax code and reduce regulations on business and agriculture.
Okay, thank you. Next question is for you. We'll start with you, Brooke. What's your opinion of the Youth Challenge program up at college?
Well,
Which is
working
located-
on that campus, I remember the years, shortly after it came, the controversy that surrounded it. I know the revenue that program brings to the university, and we wouldn't survive without it. Frankly, I think it's a great thing for Dillon that we are helping these young people move on with their lives and make something of themselves.
Yeah.
First of all, it's a great program, and I want to talk about the human side of it for a second, not the fiscal side. But the human side of it is it is a program that is helping at-risk youth get back on track in a positive way and going back and becoming productive members of society. There's been very, very few, I can't remember the exact statistic, but on one hand that you can count the number of students that have actually gone through the program, that have made it through the mentor program, that have ever ended up in our correctional system. So that takes me to the fiscal side of the Youth Challenge program. It's a great return on our investment. It simply is. I mean, you look at what it costs to incarcerate an inmate in the correction system is about north of $50,000 a year per inmate, and this costs us about $16,000, something like that, per student, and it's a one-time deal. So I mean, it's a great return on investment too, besides an asset to the community.
Okay, thank you. I think I could probably guess both of your answers to the next one. We'll start with you, Jeff. Do you believe agriculture is the most important industry in Beaverhead County?
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Yes.
Okay, I know you did do that.
We are the 5th largest cattle producing county, not in the state of Montana, in the country.
Okay, looking toward the future, Brooke, will have you answer this first. What do you see as the most important business or industry in the future of Beaverhead County?
Well, I don't think there's any one. I do believe that agriculture will continue to be a big industry in this county. High-tech jobs. I recently listened to Greg Gianforte speak and listened to him talk about bringing high-tech to rural communities, and I think that is a very viable option.
Jeff?
Of course, agriculture. I think we need to do all we can do to keep it pinned up and healthy. But also, I think there's a lot of potential in the computer age to bring high-tech jobs here, because people can move here and bring their jobs with them. But I think we need to get back to the basics as well, and that's our natural resources. I think there's a lot of potential for timber. There's a lot of discussion around timber. I know our county commission is working on a project with the governor and trying to get a vibrant timber economy again. And I mean, I think that we need to get some people working in the sawmills. I think we can do better. We need to continue to try to get the regulatory environment relaxed a little bit so we can start doing some more mining. Some small mining operations would be good. Now, I don't know that the potential for oil and gas development is here, because I don't know what the geocharts from when they seismographed this country 30 years ago look like. Whoever has that information keeps it pretty close to their chest. But if there's an opportunity for oil and gas development, I mean, if I could coin a phrase that I borrowed from Sarah Palin, drill, baby, drill. But I think that getting back to the basics, I mean, we need some jobs. We need to continue to look for jobs that pay families a living wage. And it's natural resource jobs that do that. So, and I think by doing that, it also, if you've got families that are making a decent wage, it also helps the whole social environment in the community, and it drills right down to, kids that have a better home life because maybe one of their parents can spend some time at home, and right down, I mean, a lot of social issues are based on people, working 2 jobs, both of them 80 hours a week, and if we can get back to some high-paying jobs or good-paying jobs, I think we can maybe solve some of those, answer some of those challenges as well.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. We'll start off with you on this question. If you had to choose only one thing that would improve life in our area, what would it be, and what would you do to make it happen? And I assume that means as a legislator.
Well, I think I might have just answered quite a bit of that with that last question, but again, I mean, good paying jobs, which are in pretty short supply in southwest Montana since we don't have the sawmill anymore. I mean, thank the Lord that we've got Barrett Minerals. Unfortunately, the 2 mines and the tax base from Barrett Minerals are in Madison County, but like one of our commissioners told me one day with kind of a smirk on his face, he's like, they get the mines and we get the road to it. But nonetheless, we still, more good paying jobs, I think, help build a strong community, and you have better schools and more money for for funding those and better streets and better infrastructure right down the line if there's some money in the pipeline from revenues.
Brookie, want me to repeat it?
No. Well, back to resource development, one of the 5 things I identified. Resource development makes us think of extractive resources such as timber, coal, oil, and gas. I think it's crucial to take a holistic view of natural resources in this state. Many areas, including District 72, have little or no connection to energy resources. However, natural resources also include grazing, recreation on public lands and waterways, and the stewardship of wildlife. I am a supporter of Steve Daines' H.R. 3962, Making Public Lands Public Act. This bill would open access for hunting, fishing, and outdoor recreation on existing public lands by purchasing easements from landowners. It uses Land and Water Conservation Fund and directs the Departments of Agriculture and Interior to use at least 1.5% of Land and Water Conservation Fund to improve access. It is funded with money from offshore drilling and does not add to the federal deficit. This is a quote by my daughter Bethany Erb for the Mule Deer Foundation, which I took off the internet. In my opinion, this comes with responsibility from sportsmen to report to the abuses, to report to authorities the abuses to landowners. This is a crucial piece to the overall success. It will take great cooperation from both sportsmen and agriculture to achieve this goal.
Okay, thank you, and that sort of leads to this next one. It's maybe a fantasy question, but I did rewrite it. I'll start with you, Brooke. What are your thoughts, if any, on the federal government turning over the management of its lands in our state to the state government?
I know that's a big campaign issue right now. Initially I think it sounds good. I mean, who doesn't favor state control over federal control? But recently I met with a sportsman's group who gave me a little different perspective on that. And the perspective was, how is the state going to manage that much land? And when we start talking about wildfires and things of that nature, this is something we need to take a very close look at.
Okay, thank you. Jeff?
The more local control we can have, the better we are. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that our own DNRC, with the challenges that they have probably brought to all of us, but could do a better job managing than the Forest Service, just because they're closer to the ground and it's quicker turnaround time for decisions, things of that nature. You look at our own forest and timbering projects at DNRC, and our DNRC actually does a pretty good job of timbering state lands. Now, with that said, there's a whole lot of questions that have not been answered, and I've spent a fair amount of time over the last year in the middle of a lot of these discussions. Number one, who has to pack the checkbook? I mean, fires. If what, let's just say in the perfect, whatever hypothetical world that the state of Montana ends up tomorrow with public lands, and there's a big fire that starts in Butte and ends up somewhere south of Jefferson City because the whole thing is pine beetle infested, who pays the bill for that? And I think we got to be real careful what we wish for. The benefit that I see in the short term of it, just from a pure leverage standpoint, is by forcing this discussion and having this discussion, I think that it holds a little bit, it holds us in a little better position to leverage when we are working with our federal agencies, because I think that the agencies are going to be a little bit easier to work with, knowing that this is hanging over their head a little bit. That's the short-term benefit. The long-term benefit, I think the devil's in the details.
Okay, thank you. I don't suppose either one of you expected this question. Start with you, Jeff. Would you support a sales tax in lieu of income and property taxes?
It's a very complex issue. If it was an across the board end-use tax in Montana, let's say you know, not on groceries or medical services, things like that, but maybe, you know, not the package of hamburger that you buy at the store, but the hamburger that you buy at the restaurant. So in other words, the in-use, it would be an in-use tax. It may work. It definitely shifts the revenue base away from property tax, which I think there's a lot of property owners that would agree it would be nice to do that. Now, I don't know if there's a political appetite to do that. I personally, I mean, the more time goes on, the more people it seem like that are willing to have the discussion. I don't know if there's ever going to be, in my lifetime, the votes in place to make it happen in Montana, but the only way that it would work, the only way that it would, I think, that would give the support to get it through is to, for every dollar that was raised in revenue through any kind of an in-use tax, a dollar had to evaporate either in property tax or income tax. So in other words, it's revenue neutral. It just shifts the base around so everybody's paying a little bit and not a few are paying a lot.
Brooke?
Well, this issue has actually been on the ballot before, and it has been defeated every time. If there was a reduction in the overall tax structure, such as property tax and income tax, yes, I think it would be a good thing to look at. It's a very fair tax. I actually called my CPA today to visit with him about this, and we never had a chance to talk about it. But yes, I think that would be something to look at.
Okay, thank you. Next one's for you to start off on, Brooke, and you've already touched on it. What is the best way to keep our children from leaving the state just to get a decent job? Or to put it in context, were you in the legislature, what would you promote to try to accomplish that?
Some of the things I've read about recently are student loan repayment programs. I think those would be a great way to bring young people back here. You know, a few years ago I told Cal, you know, when you and I die, this place is going to be a ghost town. There were no young people coming back. And in the past few years, you know, I've seen Colin and some of his friends, and you know, they're finding opportunities here. You know, the lifestyle is something they want to have. When I go around and I talk to voters and I meet new people, I ask them, why did you choose to move here? And they never say, because I found the highest paying job anywhere in Dillon, Montana. They always say, I like to hunt, I like to fish, I like to hike, I have a couple of horses I like to take in the backcountry. So I think people are foregoing a higher paying job for the quality of life. And that's my answer.
Okay, Jeff?
It gets back to jobs and lifestyle, and I think there is a lot to be said for the Montana lifestyle. But it always seems like it seems counterproductive to me that we have a great education system in Montana. We have a good higher education system in Montana. We invest a lot of resources in our kids K through 12, and then we invest a lot of resources in getting young people through college with a great education so they can be hired away by Boeing or Microsoft, because that's where the good paying jobs are. I'm not saying that we need to quit doing a marvelous job of educating them and preparing them. I think we need to do a better job with bringing the kind of jobs to Montana that's going to employ some of our own graduates, and not just college graduates, getting back to, you know, just blue-collar jobs, but ones that pay well, I think would go a long way. And because there's nothing that says that we can't enjoy a good Montana lifestyle and clean water and clean air and good trout rivers. And I don't know anybody that would turn down a $100,000 a year job and still get to go fly fish every night after work. So I think we can have our cake and eat it too. We just got to bring the jobs back home.
All right, thank you. The next question will start with you, Jeff. Do you believe collaboration and compromise are important? And if so, what specific experience do you have, and how did it affect the situation?
Without a doubt. I mean, you know, I think that, you know, collaboration on any project that you work on is important. I mean, you never, when you start into a project and there's more than one person involved, you've got to find middle ground and move the ball forward. And I mean, I think there's a bit of an art to compromise without selling your principles. But finding middle ground and getting the job done is key to anything. Now, as far as specifics, I guess a couple things come to mind. I'm going to use legislative examples, but getting back to, and I guess I could address being a co-sponsor of bills being brought into question earlier and kind of weave it into this discussion right now. But in the 2011 session, the work comp bill that we got passed was a lot of collaboration. And when I put down that I was a co-sponsor, it was more than just being a bill to sign her to the top of the bill, but our Speaker Welborn tasked the sponsor, who was Scott Richner, but he tasked Harry Clark, myself, and Tom Berry, all representatives. We were all on business and labor, and we each had a different element that we were to take care of. And interestingly enough, mine was trying to build the relationships and kind of being the liaison between our committee and that, and that bill as it was moving forward, and doing some work with the governor's office. And then the others all had a little bit of it, some of them were working with the state fund, in any way we kind of all had a little bit of a different element, because there was a lot of moving pieces of that. But for the first time, I mean, we had the majority of, the Republicans had the majority, which is probably a little bit easier climate to get something done with work comp reform. But when you have a Democrat governor and you've got, the trial attorneys that come in and they've got a very different view on work comp, or where at least where the savings is going to come. Is it going to come at the cost of the insurance policy, or is it going to come on the backs of the workers? So it took a lot of getting that through. And finally, when it was all said and done, the governor signed it, and today there's businesses in Montana that are working on, at 30% savings, which is a lot better than, now we're sort of the middle of the pack rather than 50th in the nation. So that's one specific example.
Okay, Brooke, want me to repeat it?
No. Every Monday night, I sit in a room full of student senators. When they come into the conference room, some come in their John Deere sweatshirts and their cowboy boots and their trophy buckles, and others come in with their hot pink dyed hair, body piercings, and tattoos. And this diverse group of students sits down at one table, and they come to consensus every night. But sometimes you find inspiration in the most unlikely places, and I've learned a lot from the students. On a personal note, one of the things that I used in my campaign materials was my husband's and mine, our participation in the Candidate Conservation Agreement with Assurances on the Big Hole River. The goal of this project was to keep the fluvial Arctic grayling a protected species. We worked with Fish, Wildlife and Parks, DNRC, the Nature Conservancy, NRCS, the Big Hole Watershed, Trout Unlimited, University of Montana Western, MSU, University of Montana, the Forest Service, and the BLM. We came together with one goal. We came from all different walks of life, and through that goal we put in 115 miles of riparian fencing, fish ladders, measuring devices, stock water tanks. This was a 20-year agreement. We all agreed to share the pain, and we agreed to water restrictions. I think this is a shining example of collaboration.
Okay, thank you. Getting back to something we've already touched on, the question is, and I've lost my place on who's next up. Yes, it's Brooke. What would you propose to improve and fund quality K through 12 and higher education?
Could you repeat the question?
What would you propose, were you a legislator, to improve and fund quality K through 12 and higher education?
I'm gonna change the question just a little bit. Is that all right?
Sure.
Recently, I attended the Night of Stars at Montana Western, where 5 educators were inducted into the Hall of Fame. 2 of those honored had taught my children, and one of them had taught me before he taught them. The next morning, I went to breakfast with Bethany and Colin, and I told them about the event the night before, and that their teachers received awards. They began to recount in detail the stories of being in Mr. Stonelake's and Mr. Stanisich's classrooms. Even 12 and 14 years later, they remembered what they had learned from them. It occurred to me that was because those educators taught with such unique and dynamic teaching styles. My fear is that federal regulation will limit the creativity so crucial in developing great teaching methods. I think our students in this district rank fairly well in standardized testing, and I worry that additional testing will put undue stress on young students, and the additional paperwork will put undue stress on teachers. I favor state and local control of public schools over federal control. And I think that early childhood education is something that is going to be in the forefront very soon here. I have visited with Julie Bullard, our early childhood education director, and she's given me some very constructive ideas.
Thank you. Jeff?
Could you repeat the question, please?
What would you propose to improve and fund quality K through 12 and higher education?
Okay, thank you. I think we can always work to improve, but I think there's a couple of things in play right now that have happened recently that I think we also need to give some time to give the opportunity to work. I'm going to touch on higher education briefly, but last session we were able to do a tuition freeze, and that was something that I think will incentivize more families that can be able to send kids there. You got to be careful, because too much tuition freeze that comes at the cost of somebody. But that was I think a good place to incentivize some places. But also we were also able to do some things to shorten the time to graduation from start to finish in colleges, because there was a long in a lot of people's minds, too much time from the time a student started till they finished, and then also to raise the graduation rate. And in turn for doing that and performing well, there's some incentive payments. There's money tied to the funding of these colleges. So the University of Montana come up just a little bit short. Now they didn't get the extra funding this year, but Montana State did. So it is working, and it's kind of gets back to the quality educator type of the deal. It's performance based, and I think that's good, because it's always good to have some incentive, and it seems like the university system is doing pretty well with that. And as far as K-12 education, there was a bill passed last time that it seemed to attract a lot of attention, and it was something that was still in play on day 89, but Senate Bill 175. And what it does, it's kind of a new concept, but there again, collaboration. It brought everybody together, from the natural resource industries to the Rural Education Association to teachers unions to the contractors to whoever, industry and trade groups, everybody, and sat down and hammered out a plan that takes funding that actually reduces property taxes a little bit and beefs up the funding to education, but it pulls it from extractive industry. So it's incentivizing more natural resource production, and it's showing the schools that that there can be maybe a little bit of additional funding, but it's got to come from different sources.
Okay, thank you. Jeff, the next question, do you think there should be campaign financing reform? And if so, what would you propose?
As far as, could you be more specific on that, please, John?
That's the question I got. I don't know what.
Well,
we had another question that I didn't put down because I knew it would be a softball. Do you believe in dark money? We have folks contributing to these organizations that don't have to disclose their names. They're supposed to be independent and not coordinating with people's campaigns. So that may be one topic that some folks would like an answer on, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, and what you would do about it if you disagree with the practice.
Well, I think this is a conversation we could sit here and have for the next 3 days and probably not get to the width and breadth of it. As far as campaign finance reform for the average person, all of you sitting out in the crowd, the maximum that you can spend on any state, on a district like we're in, is $170 maximum per election cycle. Okay, which is, I'll tell you what, it takes a lot of $170 for one thing in a district like ours is a lot of money for somebody to be able to support you with. So you end up running a campaign on a lot of $25 checks. Okay. So I think we're a little bit behind the curve on that. I also think that we could raise the aggregate limit on political action committees, on light PACs, the ones that that they have to report who their donors are. They have to report where their money's coming from, and they also have to report where they're spending it on. And I think that our PAC limits could go up a little bit. Now, with that said, when you look at the other side of this thing, it's not just of what's happened late, but there was a bill coming through the Senate last session on dark money, and it come through the Senate, it got to the House, it stalled out in a House committee, and I was the one that stood up on the House floor to make a blast motion on it, and it was the reason that I did that. I thought the discussion needed to continue. I think there was a lot that bill needed, but I think that we need to have the discussion, and there can be the argument made for freedom of speech. Well, freedom of speech is no different than freedom of the press. If I write a letter to the editor, I have to sign my name to it before the publisher is going to publish it. And I also feel that with freedom of speech, that there's a responsibility to let people know who you are, and it makes people accountable for telling the truth and accountable to who's backing it. And I think that's a fair thing to let the voters know, because by making it secretive, it allows a lot of shenanigans to happen, and I think that it hurts the process, and the ones that lose in the end are the voters.
Thank you, Brooke. It's wide open. You can
campaign finance reform. Well, obviously, from what we've seen in this election cycle, yes. But I can't say I have the solution for that. As far as dark money, I think there's one good way to stop it. Don't accept it. As soon as I filed, I had some people calling me and wanting to send me money, and I checked around, found out who they were, and decided I didn't want to be any part of that, and I didn't want to be beholden to those people. So just don't take it.
Okay, thank you. Start with you on the next question, Brooke. What is your position on TSEP grants and whether they are important, particularly to Beaver County?
Not sure I know what those are.
A transportation system enhancement program.
I don't have an answer for that.
Okay, Jeff.
Of course. I mean, TSEP funding is the Treasury State Endowment, I think, is what that stands for. But it's money that comes from the state for bridges and water infrastructure projects. And of course, I think our county commissioners could probably answer this better than me, the actual impacts. But if it wasn't for TSEP funding, it would be pretty tough to build bridges up in the Sheep Creek Basin or going up Birch Creek or whatever, and with an aging infrastructure, the entire infrastructure system in Montana, and time to time from upkeep and maintenance, TSEP funding is huge to these counties.
Okay, thank you. Let's have another question on bullying here, but geared towards the legislator. I guess we're start off with you, Jeff. Would you be willing to sponsor legislation to make bullying or harassment crimes under state law?
Well, it's certainly a loaded question. I guess it depends what the legislation said, and I don't have the silver bullet right now. And I agree that it has to start at home. And I mean, I can agree in principle with what some of the candidates said earlier tonight, but I'll tell you what. when you have to, I mean, not have to, but when you sit down with a parent of a kid that's being bullied and you see the terror in their eyes and you hear the personal stories and the pain that it causes, I think it's a conversation that we need to keep having. Now, in the 11th session, a bill actually came, and I think I can't remember the exact components of it, but it came to through the education committee that I was sitting on that session. And it's really tough to have a paintbrush, a broad brush approach to Montana because you simply can't legislate good behavior. But I think it's a discussion that we need to keep having and get some minds together because it's definitely a problem. And I don't know what you do if you put the onus back on the parents for bad behavior in kids or whatever, but, the people that have to experience it, it's not a pleasant thing, and I think that we at least owe it to them to have the discussion and keep having the discussion until we can move the chains forward.
Brooke?
I'm not sure that you can legislate bullying. I think that probably needs to start in the home and in the school. I want to touch on cyberbullying, though. I've had some experience with that this week, and now I know the undue stress that causes a person.
Okay, thank you. We had a whole string of questions here, and the person that submitted them actually through somebody else wanted these to be framed so you have to answer yes or no. And having lived on the dark side in my previous life, you always want to ask the yes or no's, but they don't always work. So if you can't answer yes or no, you have to explain it. Go ahead. We'll start with you, Jeff. Would you support legislation to create real, whatever that means, public charter schools?
Well, I guess probably the million-dollar question there is real. School choice, absolutely. I've spent my own time and resources going to symposiums, whatever have you. I've sat through 3 days or 4 days with Governor Bush when he was in Florida talking about it. And if we could put together something on school choice in Montana that worked, but the way, I mean, you've got to have a bill that works. We've got to have something that we can actually support and vote on, not just because it says charter schools. It's not necessarily a good bill. I mean, there was a bill last session that ended up dying, and the reason, I mean, that bill right in the heart of the bill was it removed the local school board. Well, I don't really want to have to come back and have that conversation with local people that their school board's pretty important to them. It made a provision for a board of directors. Well, there was nothing in that law that said, or in that proposal that said that board of directors couldn't be 5 guys in a room in New Jersey. And I think we can do better than that. Now, if it was a proposal to maybe the 5 or 7 largest school districts in Montana and a creative way to have some sort of school choice, I think it's a discussion that needs to happen, because if we can keep kids from falling through the cracks, any way we do that, that's fine, but I think we got to be real careful. It's a slippery slope, and I mean, we heard, I honestly, this is the one issue that I heard more from my constituents on than anything else, and I bet I had 300 little yellow sheets on my desk from home, and the ones that come from other places in the state or out of state on any issue, I put in one pile, but issues, or the messages that come to our desk from my district, I had probably between 250 and 300 of them, and I had one constituent that questioned me on school choice, and I had the other 250, why I voted against it, and I had the other 250 or 300 saying, you know what, thanks so much for your vote on that. And these were school board members, and these were farmers and ranchers and people that small schools are important to them. So we got to be real careful. There's a way to do it, but the proposal, whoever drafts this up and whoever decides to sponsor it, needs to give us something that we can vote on.
That's a qualified yes.
That's a qualified yes.
Okay. Brooke?
Charter schools and magnet schools are one version of school choice. That being said, charter schools are not a magic bullet, and there is little chance of these solutions working in our small rural communities. I understand the supporting argument in urban areas, But in small communities where there is only one school to attend, our focus should be on making that school the very best it can be.
Okay, thank you. Next question, Brooke. Would you support legislation to create tuition tax credit scholarships? I don't exactly know what that is.
The scholarship part kind of throws me. First, let's make a distinction between a voucher and a credit. Vouchers take taxpayer money and give it to parents where it can be used for private school education, and tax credits would have a greater impact on state revenue because they come directly off taxes owed by that person. I would not support tax credits. Both of these have budget implications as they divert tax revenue. They would have to be part of a balanced budget, and if money is diverted, it has to be made up somewhere. I would only support any reforms if they are fully accounted for in the budget.
Okay. I guess I know where this is going. Jeff, would you support legislation to create a school choice voucher program?
Personally, probably not. I mean, for one thing, I'm from, House District 72 is, Dillon is the largest metropolitan area that we have, and the rest of it is 7,500 square miles of Silver Bow and Beaverhead County. And I think there's people that could do a better job if there was a proposal. I'm not saying that I would or wouldn't support the proposal if somebody else carried it, but I don't see any reason to support a school voucher program on a concept that is not going to work in Beaverhead County with our current population. So, no.
Okay, Brookie?
I just answered that.
I thought you did. Okay. I don't know what this next one means. I guess we had this word real again. Would you, we'll start with you, Brookie. Would you support a budget that reduces real spending?
I have no idea what that means.
I don't either. I guess how about supporting a budget that reduces spending? Forget the real.
Yeah, I suppose so.
That,
of course. I mean, you've got to look at the budget and look at the spending and where it's going to, and these are complex issues. But just like in the 2011 session, I mean, we were able to cut about 6% out of the overall budget, and 6% seems like it should be pretty easy to do. But when the lion's share of a budget goes for either education, correctional, or health and human services, there's a lot of moving pieces there. And I mean, what do you do when you start messing with that money? But I mean, you always got to be vigilant and do the best job you can, get the most bang for the buck out of the money, and cut where you can. But you can cut yourself, you can cut yourself right out of business too. I mean, because I mean, if you just vote no on all spending bills, I mean, pretty soon we have roads that are in disrepair and bridges that can't be replaced because, PSEP and all. I mean, that's all spending. That's all spending. So.
Okay, the next question, I'm going to read it and then I'll maybe modify it and start with you, Jeff. Would you support legislation that reduced Montana income taxes? And I suppose the corollary would be without reducing spending. But
well, did you ask me if I would support it or if I would?
Would you support legislation that reduced income taxes?
Yeah, I mean I would, but it depends on where you're going to be pulling the revenue from, or if you can actually find a hole in the budget that you don't have to backfill. Montana's income tax is, I mean, it's actually fairly average for the states around us. Our property tax is disproportionately high to other states. I think if we're going to start cutting, we can do better. Business equipment tax was, I think it's ratcheted down from, I believe it was 6% at one time, and in each session we get that knocked down a little bit. And when there's businesses that have, $20 million worth of oil rig equipment in Sydney and you cut another % off, I mean, that might be the difference between keeping them here or drilling 5 miles across the border. So I think business equipment is something that I would like to see it zeroed out at some point in time as well.
Okay.
Yes, if we had revenue to balance the budget.
And I think Jeff already touched on this. Brooke, would you reduce property taxes or try to?
Try to, yes.
Jeff?
Of course.
We're getting down to the yes and no's. That's good. Okay, let's see. This is for you, Jeff, or for both of you. We'll start with Jeff. Would you sign the Taxpayer Protection Pledge?
What is the taxpayer?
I have no idea.
Is that like a no new tax pledge?
I don't know. I'm just reading what we got.
You know what? I honestly don't know what the Taxpayer Protection Pledge is, but signing pledges of any kind is a slippery slope because that's a good way to get worked into a corner and either overpromise and underdeliver on which, you know, I'm not a big fan of signing any kind of pledge. You look at the bill and you vote on it on its merits.
Okay.
I would never sign a no increase in taxes pledge. That cost the United States president an election at one time.
Right there. Brookie, would you oppose Medicaid expansion?
Okay. Here we go. Affordable Care Act and Medicaid expansion. The Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare as it is known, is a federal issue. Medicaid expansion, which is an extension of the Affordable Care Act, is a state issue. I have sought varying opinions on this subject and have attempted to educate myself. Make no mistake, I do not consider myself an expert on the Affordable Care Act. This is a legislative issue that has plagued me more than any other. But in my humble opinion, tort reform should have been a huge part of the Affordable Care Act. Physicians practicing defensive medicine are a significant cost driver of high health care premiums. Anyone can file a malpractice lawsuit against a doctor or other professional for any reason. Even if the charges are dismissed and are deemed frivolous, and even if it is simply a matter of extortion, there are still consequences to the person named. I have watched 2 individuals close to me become targets of frivolous malpractice suits. The devastation caused by this sometimes results in a person leaving their practice entirely. The innocent person named in the suit has great costs associated with defending themselves, and in the aftermath, their malpractice premiums are increased. The Affordable Care Act was supposed to cover the uninsured and the underinsured. Now states have been told that there is a gap, which translates to 70,000 people in Montana. Many of these people are the working poor and the very people that the Affordable Care Act was supposed to cover. A Montana rancher told me that if he were to purchase a tractor and it reduced adjusted gross income, that he could possibly qualify for the subsidy. The federal government will cover this gap for 2 years, and after that the responsibility is transferred to the state of Montana. Remember, the federal government is broke. There is a cost of $100 million to the state just for implementation and administration. In the 2 years, the state will have to co-pay a larger portion. Some estimates are at a cost of $100 million per year for administration and implementation alone. That doesn't cover the cost of Medicaid the state will pick up after the federal government backs out. I am not unsympathetic to the plight of the uninsured. This Monday, I finished campaigning and stopped at a restaurant late in the evening for dinner. The waitress was mopping the floor and closing up for the night. I thought to myself, she doesn't have health coverage, and what happens to her if she gets sick? But I don't believe that implementing something that we are so unsure of just because we are in need of reform is the right thing to do. My fear is that we will create a monster that we will never be able to rein in, and that it will break the backs of young people trying to start life. And here is the legislation. I can show it to somebody else if they want to see it afterward.
Okay.
The question was, do I support Medicaid expansion?
Yeah, would you oppose it or support it?
Well, Medicaid expansion, full-on expansion, no, I don't support it. And last session, there were 3 that I can think of off the top of my head, Medicaid expansion, talking about 2, one in the House and one in the Senate. There were Senator Hunters in the House and Wands and Reeds in the Senate. Quite truthfully, neither of them never made it to the House for a vote. Now, there were some proposals floating around to try to come up with a solution to take Medicaid, to take public dollars to drive people to the private insurance market. And I spent a lot of time on the phone with our local hospital on that proposal, and what they kind of liked about it, it was insurance dollars pay better rates than Medicaid dollars too, so it's a better way to keep the hospitals whole, and it was more of a free market approach. But as far as full-on Medicaid expansion, no, I don't support it. But there's a signature gathering drive going on right now to put it before the voters, and that's one reason why I was adamant last session to at least bring it to the floor for a discussion so we could do something. He's kicking the can down the road is, I think that we're going to, there's a good chance that if they get the people that are gathering signatures get that on the ballot, it's probably going to pass. And it's, those kind of proposals are full of unintended consequences before the voters. I mean, just too big of an issue, but I mean, it scares me a little bit because we have the opportunity to do something that had a Montana-made solution, and we just couldn't get there at the end of the day.
Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
On that issue, there were 10 Republican votes yes, there were 51 Republican votes no, and there were no Democratic votes no.
Okay, Jeff, you touched on this energy development, and the question is, would you support trying to increase energy development via reductions of regulations and or court reform? And I suppose they meant tort reform. I don't know.
Now, could you repeat that, John?
The question, would you support increased Montana energy development?
Yes.
By using regulation reduction in regulations, or court reform?
Well, I guess I'm not sure what's behind the tort reform, but as far as regulation, absolutely. I mean, I think we touched on that earlier, but making a more favorable regulatory environment is one of the three-legged stools to more energy, the three legs to the stool, rather, for energy production in Montana. And then, of course, you've got work comp, reduction in work comp was a big one, and then business equipment tax. I mean, those are the three things that are making us less competitive with the states around us that have the same pool of oil underneath us. But definitely, we've got to. It's unacceptable in my mind. Our DEQ takes 3 years to write a permit to start drilling oil in Montana and North Dakota. They're doing it in 6 months, and I can't believe that we're doing that much better job of combing over the application. We need to do a lot better. And I understand that it's getting a little bit better, but we need to get much better.
I'm assuming when they say court reform, I'm guessing they meant trying to reduce lawsuits, but those lawsuits are brought under federal law, so there's nothing you could do about that anyway. Brookie?
Could I have the question again?
The question was, would you support increasing Montana's energy development by reducing regulations?
Well, yes, I think so. Workman's comp, and Jeff was part of this, they reduced the workman's comp premiums in the last session, but in the aftermath of that, the regulatory and compliance issues went up so drastically that for us as business owners, we've had to hire additional bookkeeping and CPA help just to comply with all the issues.
Okay. Let's see. Now we're going to be talking about retirement plans, contribution plans, and there's actually 2 questions here, so I'm going to read them both, and then you can just wing it. I guess we start with Jeff. Would you support legislation to establish a hybrid plan for new employees, which borrows the best from both defined benefit and defined contribution plans? And the next question, would you support legislation to establish a defined contribution retirement plan for new hires? Basically the same question.
I guess it depends how it's written. Now, there were a couple of different proposals last session when we were looking at state retiree or the retirement accounts on defined contributions and defined benefits. And first of all, defined benefits for the people that are hired now, we have no other choice but to honor those agreements. Now, on new hires, I think we can look, but from what I've learned from talking to actuaries and reading reports that it's actually more expensive in the long run. And I don't know the details. I'm just passing along information that I've read, but like a 401k program, because of the risk involved and the, you know, wherever they have their investment money tied up and stuff that backs these things, that actually can cause some problems there too with the defined contribution portion of it. But I think that's one thing that we've got to have an honest conversation with one another about moving into the future is, I mean, we were headed down a really bad path in Montana on state retirement plans, and I mean, there's a lot of states, you know, there's states all over the country that are broke because of retirement plan and obligations made to people so many years ago. And I mean, we've got to do something, but it's more complex than it is, but I do and I don't. I guess it depends. We've got to have something that we can support, and the defined contribution plan last session, it wasn't there. Brooke?
Well, as a public employee, I am one of the people that benefits from those plans. But an expansion would be a huge budget item, and I think, you know, you would have to know what's in the budget first.
Okay. And I think maybe you've indicated your answers to these. This last question, we'll start with Jeff. Would you oppose implementation and or funding of Common Core curricula in Montana?
Well, that's would I reduce? I mean, the only way Common Core is a set of standards that was adopted by the Public Board of Education. So if we're going to defund Common Core, basically the only option that we have as a legislature to make an impact on Common Core is defunding education. So basically, I guess if we want, you know, that would mean getting the funding for education itself, and I'm not sure that's a conversation I want to have with people in this district. That education, I mean, it seems to be something that's important to everybody. So I don't know exactly how to answer that, but the way the question is worded doesn't really fall in line with the way that the laws that are in place. I mean, the Board of Public Ed is something that was mandated by our 72 Constitution. I mean, that's part of our Constitution. Funding the education itself comes from the state. So I mean, if we're going to do away or affect Common Core, then we basically got to affect the education around it, the funding for it. So no.
Okay.
I already expanded that other question and talked about Common Core.
What's that?
I already expanded that other question.
Okay. Now we have like 3 questions for Jeff. And if anybody has a question they want to ask, maybe now's the time to come down. Jeff, one person read your response to the mailings by the Montana Family Foundation as an attack on Brooke, and that you accused her of being a party to the ads. Is this your belief, or was that your intent?
No, that's not it at all. I mean, first of all, I simply made a statement. If you read the first sentence of that, I think it's all right there. I mean, I basically said, and I quote, "I'm under attack from extremists who are trying to buy local elections." And by what I mean by that is they are spending a lot of money using skewed data to throw the results of an election. I think another defining paragraph is the choice to follow the path or not follow. Matter is simply up to my opponent, and that's what it boils down to. So, I mean, there was nothing intended as an attack.
Brooke, any rebuttal?
Yes, your newspaper article softened your position, but your initial Facebook comments and your Dillonite Daily comment did accuse me of that point blank.
Okay. Next question for Jeff. You sponsored House Bill 309 to clarify the prohibition of recreational access to ditches. Had the bill passed, how would it have impacted the public trust doctrine and the right of the public to access?
I guess that depends on who you ask. I mean, that was a long time ago, but it's still of my opinion that House Bill 309 was simply to clarify recreational access to an irrigation ditch. There was a lot of spin put on that it would have made every river in the state a ditch, or every ditch in the state, or a river in the state a ditch by definition because of braided channels and things like that. So, I mean, the lesson to be learned on that one from me is collaboration, and there was a lack of, there was probably a woeful lack of collaboration, and people used an emotional issue to churn up a lot of half-truths and rhetoric around it. But as far as what the language of that bill said, I mean, even the people that were so resistant to that sat down at a table and tried coming up with amendments, and they even agreed in principle of what we were trying to do, but at that point, they weren't going to back up because it had been a pretty good fundraising mechanism for them. But, the lesson that I took away from it was more collaboration and start a lot longer and, ahead of time, because it's still, we have a law that doesn't have a clarification on it, and someday that's going to come back and bite somebody, and that was my intent to begin with, is to put that to rest so that there was a bright line shined on the law.
May I respond?
Yes.
As I've campaigned, this is the one thing that people bring up over and over again. And sometimes it's to my advantage to be married to a water rights lawyer. This bill originated when Montana was admitted to statehood. Waters were transferred to the state to be held in trust for the benefit of citizens. Citizens through the legislature passed a compromise bill that the public could use the mean high water mark using natural waters in Montana with some limitations. Ours is one of the most liberal in the country. The Mitchell Slough case that we're talking about involved 16 miles of historic river channel. When the river moved, it required digging a ditch from the river to the slough, which had intercepted springs and groundwater. The old channel, still connected to the river, still natural water, and filled with native fish. This was a fact-specific case. The 400 yards that they dug from the river to connect the channel could have been argued a ditch. For example, the Beaverhead River is dropped into the slough at times. Huey Lewis wanted the entire 16 miles. The ditch would have made all sloughs private water. It could have made the Beaverhead River a ditch from Clark Canyon Dam on down. When you Google HB 309, you get this. Sportsmen, remember the sordid six. Legislators who support bills like this need to be made accountable. And Jeff, your name is in that. Sponsor, Jeff Welborn. This was an attempt to gut stream access law by saying that any part of a stream used in any way for irrigation was not subject to the stream access law. It passed the House and died in the Senate committee.
Okay. A related question, Jeff. Do you plan on sponsoring a similar bill in the future, especially in light of the 2014 Supreme Court decision in Public Lands Access Association versus Madison County Commissioners, which I believe is the Kennedy case?
So what you're asking me, do I plan on sponsoring something that's going to basically do away with stream access itself?
I guess sponsoring a bill that I guess would do the same thing that 309 did.
No.
No? Okay. Any comment on no?
What was the question again?
Whether Jeff planned on sponsoring similar legislation after the Supreme Court's case this year on the Kennedy access problem on the Silo Bridge, I believe.
Was that the county road case?
Well, it was the prescriptive easement case, but most people overlook that. But it was the county road case.
Comment on that.
Okay. Well, the last question I'll ask both of you. The question was for you, Jeff. What's your opinion of the decision in the Kennedy case? Or have you read it?
I haven't read it. I would like to speak, if I could, about, stream access, I think, is a law that's worked remarkably well. There was a lot of people that were definitely afraid of it 30 years ago, but I think people have figured out that the sky's not falling in, and Montanans, both landowners and sportsmen, have learned how to live with it, and as long as you stay within the high water mark, it is the law of the land. So, it's when I actually, in interest of full disclosure, in the 2009 session, the bill that actually made bridge access for the first time, getting back to collaboration, Mike Milburn was the brains behind that. He wasn't the sponsor of it, but I was a yes vote, getting it in House Fish and Game and both on the floor, because it was a collaboration that seemed to bring a little bit of resolve to that issue. And as far as the court case, I'm not going to weigh in on what the Supreme Court did there because, I mean, I think they upheld a law that has worked pretty well for the last 30 years.
Well, you're right. What they did, they did. Brooke, any comments on the case?
No, I did have the court case explained to me, but I'm
Not gonna, it's pretty technical.
It's getting late.
Okay, no questions from the audience? All right. We each have 5 minutes to convince these folks why they should vote for you. We'll start with Brooke.
Okay, I'm going to say, in closing, these are my stripes, and my stripes don't change. What you see is what you get. Mr. Welborn is knowledgeable about the issues and uses political speak fluently. After all, he has served 3 terms. The real issue is not how well either one of us speak. It's how we vote. Mr. Welborn claims to vote with Republicans 90% of the time. We all know that Democrats and Republicans oftentimes agree on bills. The votes are not always along party lines. What he does not want to address is that the 10% of the time he did not support his base. He left the people that brought him to the dance on the issues that really matter. Let me put it this way. A family has 10 votes. 9 of those votes are what color sprinkles do we put on the ice cream. The 10th vote is should we pull the plug on Grandma. You see what I mean? A few of the votes we discussed, it appears Mr. Welborn wants to support Huey Lewis and other out-of-state interests on stream access, as well as expand Medicaid. He is a responsible Republican. Is that what you call it when you vote to give public employee pay raises and leave them partially unfunded, forcing the university into a position of cutting programs and raising tuition? There have been several mailings that have circulated funded by various PACs. I was not contacted prior to the mailings. In fact, these PACs do not know how I would vote on any issues. He was well aware of that these were coming and that they were sent out across the state. In fact, yes, he questions my allegiance. This is called political grandstanding. Jeff, your attempt to pass legislation that would provide 16 miles of private fishing for out-of-state interests and limit fishing access for local people is hypocritical, and you abandoned those that elected you. I know I have some things to learn, but of this I'm certain. Republicans differ on many social issues, but when it comes to fiscal responsibility, we remain united. We like to know that we have money in the bank before we spend it, and we take care of those who elected us.
Thank you. Jeff?
Thanks. I guess I'd just like to say in closing that I'm proud of the fact that I'm thoughtful in my deliberations. My goal is simple, and that's to do the right thing for Montana. Does it take a coalition sometimes? Yeah, it does. I think we discussed that earlier, but it takes the ability to listen to folks, to get good information, and be willing to make a decision and stand behind it. Trusted leadership, earned respect, it doesn't come overnight. I would like to address a little bit about the issue about the 90%, the 89% actually of the time that I vote. I mean, a report card is a report card, but this is an honest report that was plugged into a spreadsheet of 423 bills that had a majority position on it, and I scored 89%. And I'm not saying that 89% is either too good or not good enough, but if you want to contrast that with somebody, the people that, consider themselves or the keepers of the true conservative conscience, one of those guys was 67% of the time with the majority position, and our own majority leader was 88%. So I would think that would be the gold standard. So you can read those numbers any way you want, but you know what? One thing that I can look you in the eye is when I vote, I have Beaverhead County in mind when I vote. And it's just the way that it is. I'm thoughtful before I make a vote. I think it through, and votes aren't easy. I don't go up there to make a statement. I go to make a difference. And I guess with that said, I just respectfully ask each of you for your support this election. One last thing that I would like to say is that through the years, I've appreciated when people call and want to discuss issues with me. My phone is always on. And I guess that I want to handle this campaign no differently. If I miss a call, I'll get back to you. But if you have something you want to say or discuss, call and visit with me about it. I'm around. I don't want to miss that opportunity. So with that said, thanks for a great forum tonight.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Brooke and Jeff and and the sheriff's candidates for coming tonight. Also want to thank the folks that submitted questions, and especially thank you in the audience for coming. And that'll do it for tonight's forum. Thank you.